So that's all I remember about that. So the question was about yeah, that story that happens in chapter 1 where he's being chased and everything really happened about like 10 years before chapter 2.
Yeah, because we meet
it's a big distance. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Much later. So you have a lot of pop culture and historical references. How many people picked up on some or all of those?
I did. I haven't grown up with him. And all the St. Cloud stuff, it's like, oh yeah, that's, I mean, if you're from St. Cloud, I think it could make it, it's extra kind of cool.
Yeah, I made a lot of references to St. Cloud environment.
Yes, you did.
Changed them a little bit, but still referred to them by name.
The only reason I knew them is because all my kids went to St. Cloud.
Oh,
University.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, so you were familiar with that?
So
with
I knew some of those references, yeah.
And the prison and.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my kids actually lived in that area. So.
What sort of pop culture references did you include, Bob?
Well, when Charlene Theory is walking through his house, his apartment, she sees like a record that's signed by Elvis.
Elvis, yeah.
And actual signed by him, and then she sees let me see. She sees he's got a photograph that's taken by the photographer Joe. Remember the famous photographer? What's his name?
Ansel Adams.
Yeah, Ansel Adams. So he's got a photograph of a redwood tree in there.
Yeah.
And he's also got a picture from the Vietnam War from one of the magazines was Life or Time magazine had a picture, a special where they had pictures of every soldier who was killed that week or that month in Vietnam. And so it was just filled there. And one of the pictures was a picture of Michael Shale's brother who had been killed in Vietnam. Oh, there's also a signed letter a signed letter from Nixon. Yeah. Because Michael wrote to Nixon and said, thank you for ending the war, because he was against that. And
yeah.
So there was musical references.
It was a Beach Boy reference, wasn't there, somewhere?
A what?
A Beach Boy reference or something, wasn't there? I seem to remember.
Buddy Holly. I don't think there was Beach Boy.
It's not Beach Boy. Okay, Buddy Holly.
So there was lots of music and historical references. And I just put that in to sort of characterize and show that he had a lot longer life than a 6th grader would.
And but did she at first kind of think maybe this is just a kid with a passion for history? But I think she wondered more, like, where did he get all this stuff?
Yeah, by the time she made it to his apartment, she didn't have to question about this for very long, because she said, what's this picture here that shows you and your brothers? It looks like it's 40 years old. And he goes, well, you're not ready for that yet. But then after he explains some stuff, and she discovers that he really is like 38 years old, then he's able to explain all those historical references.
Is he 38 in this book? I thought he was
39.
old.
39.
39 in 1979. Yeah, because he was born in 1940.
40.
Okay, that's right. I'm thinking of the next book already, because in that one he's like 72 or something.
In the Time Leaper.
Yeah, when we meet him again. And that's my most recent memory of him. So Charlene Theory, the counselor, she has lost her husband and a son in a car accident. For everyone, how do you think that loss contributed to her motivation to investigate Matthew? No ideas?
So you don't have any opinion on that?
I would like to hear your input, Bob, on why you think that affected her.
Well, I made it a little bit obvious because her son's name was
Max.
Mm-hmm.
And his name, the protagonist's name, is Matt.
Mm-hmm.
And at one point, she accidentally calls Matt Max.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I guess I did that because to sort of show that she was hurting, but she was also like, she was seeking, sort of like Matt was almost like a child replacement for her. So she was trying to seek and establish this. Since she already had a loss, that was more motivation for her, even to take this personally, to investigate way beyond the normal expectation that you'd think of a school counselor going in and investigating somebody.
Do you think she was sort of seeking a replacement son, or just, you know, this is a kid I can maybe help even though I couldn't help my son?
Yeah, I wouldn't say a replacement son, but I would say that she had a hole in her life, and he was a young boy who needed help. So, and he didn't seem to have any parents, so she stepped right into that role.
And I think she discovered that he had no parents when she went to a play and recognized the woman who had played his mother.
Yeah, right. The play that Charlene Theory went to was The Importance of Being... It was what?
The Zoom just kicked out. I just lost you. Huh.
Oh, we can see you.
We can see you.
That's weird. I'll try again. Okay, keep going, guys. Don't worry.
So the play that Charlene Theory went to was The Importance of Being Earnest. And that was a play that I actually was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I played the vicar, I think, in that.
I didn't remember you were in a play.
You didn't? I was in like 3 plays.
Oh, yeah.
I was also in the Christmas Carol. And,
did I not attend them? Didn't Mom and Dad bring us?
This is weird.
Well, they didn't love me. They didn't come to my plays.
I
don't know if they went or not. But,
I just watched The Importance of Being Earnest today because I always show it on the last day of my British literature class. So we just watched the movie version with Colin Firth today. I love that version.
Really? Oh,
so what was your role in the play when you were
the
in it?
vicar?
Oh, funny.
I don't really remember much about it, but I know it was kind of a
Chasuble, yeah.
So yeah, anyway, but the reason I chose that is because in The Importance of Being Earnest, there's a guy who's pretending to be 2 different people.
Right.
Sort of a clue. And then, but what happens was that the counselor had made arrangements on the phone to meet the mom. And so she had met who she thought was Matt's mom. And then she went to the play and she found out that the woman she met was really just an actress. It wasn't Matt's mom. She had been playing a role as Matt's mom. And
why didn't she just assume, oh, that's interesting, Matt's mother is an actress?
Because she looked at the play at the back, and she found her real name.
Okay.
So then she discovered that she hadn't met Matt's mom, and she hadn't met Matt's dad either.
And of course that raises the question, why is somebody pretending to be a kid's mother?
Mm-hmm.
There's a side story with Charlene. She's having a hard time working with a student named Wayne Zimmerman. And we eventually learned that he is the son of the driver who killed Charlene's family. And Matthew figures this out, and he sort of manipulates things to force Charlene to confront that she's got this bias and this anger, even though it's not this kid's fault. So for those who read this, did you think that this helped the storyline, or did it confuse it? And what did it say about Matthew's character?
That sounds really cool, Bob. I don't remember it.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Did you remember it at all, Chris?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. At first, I didn't quite understand why he was trying to push Wayne towards her more. Why Wayne kept showing up. Mm-hmm. I kind of must have gone over it really quickly. But then when I realized that what the connection was between Wayne and the counselor, it was a very powerful kind of thing that he was trying to do. And I must have glossed over it as I was reading. I didn't quite put the connection together between the counselor and Wayne's father. But
well,
I thought
it wasn't laid out right away. It was gradual. You were learning about it, as you read through it.
Okay, well, fair enough then. But I really like the way you ended it. However, I thought that was a fun way. So the fact that she is trying to avoid constantly dealing with this kid because he personifies basically the pain of losing her husband and son. Mm-hmm. Every time she sees him, it's like, well, how can I deal with the fact that the father of this kid, even though it's nothing to do with the kid, of course, represents the main reason for my grief and pain in life. And now here he is in front of me asking for my help, and I'd rather throttle him than help him. But here we go, and then she finally manages to do that, and then has that moment where she thinks, thinks the father's dead, and he isn't actually dead, and comforts the child, and the child, of course, the dad isn't dead, and it's all good, and and the kid's over, and oh, no problem, and yet it's that incredible release for her when she realizes she can actually let it go, and it's handled very well. I like the way you did that. So yeah, it's a powerful scene. It's an interesting scene. I think it says a lot about the Michael character, that he is very altruistic. You see that time and time again, the way he throws himself in the middle of fights, the way he stands in even at the risk of getting hurt himself and doesn't fight back. He doesn't cause pain even when he stands between people fighting. You see that in him. And it's kind of hard to understand at first. What does he mean he's helping? What does he mean he's doing these things? But then you see it, and then when you see all his notebooks and how he's been helping kids in all these other schools, he really does see that very much as his purpose in life, to be as a child. And again, that's the Christ reference too, because he manifests as a child. He comes down from wherever to be a child among children and help the children, even though he's not a child. Even though he's not a child. You see, that's another Christ reference, of course. It's an incarnational way of representing himself as a child, though he's not a child, to help those children who need his help.
Very nice. So, well said.
It's a beautiful reference, and he does it well. But he does it in a way that doesn't actually give away that he's an adult to the kids, so that he can actually approach them and so that they trust him. And that's actually a very powerful way of doing it.
What's so neat about this decision is he has really, not recently in the story's chronology, but he's really been thrown for a loop, that here's this normal kid, and all of a sudden one day he realizes he isn't aging, and bit by bit he realizes he's going to have a hard time getting through college because of how he looks. And then he's captured by these government agents. He is forced to be separated from his family to spend his life on the run. He could have devolved into anger. He could have become diehard and gone after the agents and tried to kill everybody. And instead, he says, no, I'm going to take this lousy situation where I'm stuck eternally in a 12-year-old's body. What a nightmare, And instead, he not only accepts it, he decides, well, I'm going to do the best possible thing. I'm going to do something that nobody else could do, because I can fit in with these kids, I can be one of them, and yet I have the wisdom of an adult. And he decides to not only make the best of it for himself, but to try and help everybody around him. And I think that's a really neat aspect of his character.
Yep, that is a strong point about his character. One of the main things.
It's kind of a cool twist on, it sounds like, on peer pressure. You always hear about people say, oh, he's hanging out with the wrong kids, or, they pressured him into it. And here's kind of an adult, mature perspective, kind of interweaving themselves into the mix and steering the kids in the right direction, which is kind of cool.
Exactly. That's what he does. And that's throughout the theme in the first half, he sees himself as a superhero. So he is there to help the kids.
So in the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, when they come back to their real life from Narnia, the four children, they haven't they come back. So they've lived in Narnia for years, and then they come back and they're the same age that they were when they went into the wardrobe. Mm-hmm. And so then they don't like it. You know, it's very hard for them. So, and then in the sequel, there's like some issues that they've experienced, but you know, they don't take it the way that your character does. They don't try to make good out of it.
Yeah, I remember that they end up getting in fights with the other boys because they are like, you're acting like children.
Yeah, and they're like, so much older in their head.
Yeah, exactly. That's his issue, that he's mature, and so he's looking at all the childhood activities from an adult perspective. And that's why he's able to get in there and save the kids in some situations too.
Mm-hmm. That would be really hard.
I like that he keeps the records of it, because I would think if you're looking at living for, 700 or 800 years or whatever he's looking at some point you're going to need to go back and look at that and go, you know what, my life is worth something. I'm using it well, and there's the proof in front of you. So chapter 5 is titled Mysteries. Did anybody notice the similarity between mystery and Ms. Theory? Nobody noticed that?
Sneaky.
My question, Bob, was why, since she's not a mystery, why did you make the word mystery similar to her name instead of, I don't know, Matt's name? Because he's the mystery.
Well, Miss Theory is the one who really she's the one who's trying to figure out Matthew's story.
Yeah.
So it's a mystery to her. And the reader is taking on her point of view, basically, and mostly in the first half of the book. So the reader is trying to uncover the mystery too. Okay. So that was why. It's kind of an accident, a nice happening, but I thought about it, that it was symbolic.
So let's jump ahead to part 2. This book is kind of clearly divided into where we first see Matthew at school and this whole story with Charlene Theory. And then part 2, we kind of back up, don't we, to his whole story with the evil senator. Mm-hmm. Why did you choose to write the story kind of in reverse order?
If I started at the beginning with the origin, then there would be no mystery about who he was, and I wanted the reader to experience the story in the same way that the counselor, Miss Theory, was experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. Did you find
so basically what it allows me to do is to make basically a 2-book story. The first part is the mystery. What's the story of this guy and everything? Why is he like this? And then the second book is the origin that explains how he became like that.
Did you struggle at all to write it that way? I can see how in one way it's easy to write it. Maybe the question is, did you worry that it would sort of mess with the reader's mind to first read the end of the story and then read the beginning of the story?
Well, I did try to structure it well. At one time, I considered alternating the past and the present scenes, but I just couldn't keep the things secret in the past that I needed to and have it timed out specifically. So that's why I decided to put the second half afterwards. And you'll notice that at the end of the first half, Charlene Theory has discovered that Matt doesn't age, and she discovered that he has a twin brother who did age, so they're different ages. And and Matt says to her, all right, you know everything about my age, but there's one thing you don't know, and that's why I'm being chased. And then Matt and his twin brother and Charlene walk into the door of their apartment. And presumably that's when Matt is going to be telling the story of how he became. And so that's the perfect time to have the origin story happen. It's almost like this is the story that Matt is telling Charlene. Mm-hmm. So that when part 2 is over with, and there's still 5 more chapters, we jump back to the present, and everybody's caught up. They know why he's being chased and everything, and now we're all set up for the final climax. So I thought it was a cool way to do that structure.
I think it did work, and I can see it as the writer probably having been quite a challenge. And I can see there maybe being concern, is it going to work for the reader the way you want it to? Because we get so close to our story.
Did it work for you, Chris and Joe?
Now that you say that, I do remember, I mean, I read this a long time ago, but whenever you first kind of came out with it, well, maybe a year after you came out with it, but I do remember that, the storyline, and then like, yeah, now they're together. You even got, does that get to the point where they're the team? Is that the start of that? That's part 3.
The team is part 3. Part 2 is all about the evil senator, and about, it actually starts when like Michael is really just starting 6th grade for the first time. Really, he really is 12 years old.
Yeah. I do remember liking how you handled going the history and explaining things. I thought it worked.
Okay.
It definitely was effective at keeping the secret. So when we start part 2 on the evil senator, we find out about the senator's attempts to make a name for himself with the Defense and Development Committee, and we find out about his wife's death from cancer. How did that affect you as the readers, learning about the senator's motivation to catch Michael? Anybody have any sympathy for the senator?
So yeah, so he was trying to figure it out to save his wife or something, right? To go back.
Well, not to save his wife, because she had already died, but that was foremost in his mind, was that he was thinking, okay, she died, I'm next, and here's a kid who's basically got the fountain of youth. What can we?
Oh yeah, if I remember right, it seemed to me like, well, he's just doing it to save his own skin.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
He said it was for other reasons, but he wasn't altruistic like Michael.
Yeah, and that was evident with his character. Like, he was just a guy you really liked to hate.
Right.
Bob, did you ever consider making it such that his wife was still dying of cancer and that he was actually trying to save his wife?
No, I didn't consider that at all, but I did make it so that he and the other people on the committee would be motivated, because they were all up in ages. Mm-hmm. And I did want to develop a little bit of sympathy for the senator, because there's a chapter when he comes home and his wife is dead and he's looking at her clothes in the closet. And so to make him into a real person and not just a evil mustache twisting villain, Yes, right. That's the one person who's got the mustache.
Yeah,
Joe's got a mustache too.
shows how evil I am.
Yeah. Go ahead, twist the mustache.
Yeah. The evil one amongst you says, I was just wondering about how, strong a motivation this whole, ever long lasting kind of soldier thing is. I was kind of still working myself in my own head, thinking how strong a motivation this really is to have these long lasting soldiers. Obviously they're still dying when you shoot them.
Right.
So that was one of my kind of enduring questions through the whole process. I mean, actually, there's probably something to be gained from having a lot of old men looking like children, who have more powers, who are strong like men, but look like children. There probably is some merit to be gained in that. But I wonder about having kind of Navy SEALs who are kind of 120 years old, whether they actually live that long. I just wondered, Bob, did you feel it was a strong enough motivation to have them living that long? I don't know. That was my kind of going through my mind thinking, other than kind of sneaky old senators who wanted to live 400 years so they could finally make it to president, that one I could see. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, there was dual motivations. Yeah. All the guys who were in the committee were all pretty old, and so they would be motivated to save their own skin.
Sure.
But they've got this sort of outward motivation where the senator can justify it. He can say, we can have these soldiers who, as long as they don't get shot on the battlefield, they can just keep getting better and smarter and experienced. That would be a good thing, right?
Could be.
He goes into quite this long history of the legal justifications for forcibly capturing Michael. Did you, as the reader, how did you feel about the long history? Did you find it interesting, or did you find it totally unnecessary?
Long history of what? Of
all these legal justifications for going
oh,
and capturing him.
yeah, they were pretty specious. I mean, I thought it was good luck with those in court. But I mean, yeah, I mean, obviously these guys were operating on the basis these guys are never going to get taken to court. Back to the long thing, though, trying to keep a soldier for 100 years, I think is pretty unrealistic. If I was a 200-year-old soldier, I want to be a general by then. Do you know what I mean? It's not just a longevity that's in place here. But anyway, moving back. Yeah.
You bring up a really interesting point, though. I was just thinking about this. Apart from the fact that you're only going to die if you actually get shot and killed.
Yeah, I don't want to be shot at for 200 years.
Yeah,
just saying.
The psychological ramification that they think they're going to send these men into battle for 120 or 200 years.
I never even thought about that, Chris.
Well, they need to put some extra chromosome in there that has no sense of self-preservation. That's the only one. They need to work on that too, Bob.
Yeah, I guess I was just thinking about them as obedient.
What is it to warfare for 200 years to see?
Can you imagine? What does that do to your mind?
Yeah.
Gosh, poor boys. Poor boys. Anyway, moving on. It's sci-fi. Come on.
Right.
Good.
So what kind of research into these justifications that you outlined?
Oh, yeah, I did a lot of historical research on stuff about like reading about the Japanese internment in history. I knew about it, but I didn't really know what it was and what the justification was on the president. What was it, President Roosevelt? I can't remember who it was.
Eisenhower, you said, wasn't it? Wasn't it Eisenhower, you said?
I don't think it was Eisenhower. I think it was.
You just said.
Roosevelt, but just about the justifications on why they did that and how people who were interned at that time were then out and they were still alive when Michael was being chased. So I tied that in with that one of the guys that he was being, one of the agents, Agent Khan.
Yeah.
Agent Khan.
Yeah.
Had actually been a child in internment at that time. So I tied that in there, and I studied the whole thing about J. Edgar Hoover and how they really were blackmailing people, and they really were planting false evidence in newspapers, and they were like basically saying, we're going to take this guy out because we think he's a commie. We don't have the evidence, so we're going to make it.
Wow.
You heard about that, and you knew about that, right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, everybody, you guys were aware of that.
Yeah. And frankly, I think it still happens today.
Talk about government overreach.
Oh, yeah.
People are going to be evil.
Yeah.
And
so it was really cool hearing about all the history on it. And I did sort of pack a lot of history into this guy's monologue. And I look, and that's the chapter that I worry the most about. I go, I probably could have taken a page out of that chapter and it wouldn't have hurt that much.
Well,
you know how that is, right, Sean? Sometimes you go.
Well, when you get into the history and it's so fascinating, you just want to share what you discovered.
Yeah, Becky knows all about writing history. Oh, and Lisa too. You know all about that, you know.
Yeah, it's a little difficult because the book I'm working on now, there's a lot of things I want to put in, but it's just boring for a reader, you know. So you have to try to figure out how to frame it in a way that's interesting. Right. And I think you do a good job of that.
Yeah, good.
You put it in a lot of dialogue, and I think you have that mastered.
I did do mostly dialogue and stuff when I'm not just having pages of history laying it out, like the narrators talking. The narrators, you almost never hear the narrator's voice in my novels.
Yeah, I think you have to be really careful about how you present it. In historical fiction, it's usually referred to as the information dump, where the author, you know, just gives you page after page of all this fascinating history, and the reader ends up skimming like 95% of it, like, okay, that's nice, but what's happening to the character? You know, you have to put that history in through just showing the setting or a conversation dropped here and there. It has to be broken up.
Yeah.
That's tricky. Michael Shale is set up. He's forced out of college and fake conscripted into the military service, and then he's in prison for medical testing. How did that affect you emotionally, the reader? How did you feel about that part of the storyline? I'm going to go tell those kids to be quiet.
Okay. Joe, do you remember anything about that, about him being imprisoned?
About Mike.
Yeah, Michael was in a military prison with his brother.
Oh yeah, and then isn't that why they tested him or did something with him so that and left his brother so they could see how it worked?
Yeah, they were doing medical tests on him, and then they said, we got to see how his genes are different, so let's get somebody else from his family and compare them. So they just grabbed his brother too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Identical twin, perfect.
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
yeah, almost identical twin, right?
Yeah, no, he really was identical, except they added something.
For those of you who didn't know about that, Michael did have an identical twin named Mark, but Mark didn't have the extra chromosome, so he just aged normally. So when Mark finally finds his brother, Mark is a grown man, and Michael still looks like he's 12 or 13 years old.
So do you ever explain how it is that of these identical twins, one of them gets that extra chromosome and one doesn't?
Yes. When the doctors are discovering about Michael's hereditary and his genes, his chromosomes, they're explaining this to the evil senator, and they're saying only one of them got the gene, and the senator goes, well, how can that be if twins divide and it's supposed to be the same? And the scientists say, because we've discovered that the genes were made that way so that that one gene won't divide. It will only go one way or the other. So that was sort of their way of sort of being able to tell that his genes were manufactured, or that gene was manufactured.
How did you, the readers, feel about the scientist revelation that Michael Shale's genes were manipulated to create him? Were you surprised? Did it bring up questions?
Did you get to that point yet, Chris?
I remember just the big
sure.
evil, learning more about the big evil organization and stuff I thought was pretty amazing what was going on behind the scenes.
Well, because I knew we had time jumpers involved in the later books, I knew obviously that this was going to be these guys from the future mucking around.
Oh.
So I just guessed that was what had happened.
Right.
Because
so
I thought
extra knowledge.
Because we'd heard your third book, I thought, oh, hello, this is where this ties in. Mm-hmm. Because when they started talking about, well, there's no science that we have now that can do this kind of thing, I thought, okay, this is where this all ties in for the future stuff. So I just assumed that was what it was. But that was basically it. So that's why I wasn't kind of overly surprised. I mean, obviously they were either going to lead us up to giving us an answer later on in the book, which didn't come. But when I saw that, I thought,
so Chris, you actually had an advantage because you had the answer, whereas like when Joe was reading the book, all he knew was that there was some technology, and it wasn't really explained, and it was sort of hinted at when the senator goes to meet at the headquarters of Chrysalis Chronology.
Yeah.
The headquarters say, I'm going to tell you a secret. We made him and he's our product.
Yeah, you get that later.
But it doesn't really say where that, how it came from the future though.
Yeah.
So Joe, you were just stuck with having no answer.
Yeah, I don't even remember kind of on how I felt when I read it. It's like, now I want to read it again.
You should. It's a quick read. It's a good read. Good quick read.
It is. It's been a while since I read it too, but I remember it was a quick and easy read. So How many of you found the escape from the prison and the ongoing chase believable? Were there any parts that you especially enjoyed about that?
Have you read about the escape yet, Chris?
I've read it all, man.
Oh, you read the whole thing?
I've read the whole book, buddy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misunderstood. I thought you said that you were at the end, or not.
No, I've read the whole thing.
Okay.
Read it all through. I found, the only thing I didn't find, I mean, maybe I need to read it again just to get exactly what happened, is when they do this little kind of diversionary tactic about slipping around and he slips away. I didn't quite understand why they would have left the door open so easily to let Michael get out. I got the bit about the, you know, undoing the screws on the shower little dead vent and everything. But I need to really look again at how he managed to slip out past the guards when Mark played his little game on them. But that was the only thing. But I mean, him escaping and using his guile to get on the school bus and realizing. The only other thing that I found, you know, that was kind of like, whoa, that's very subtle, was his clues about hiding, not so much the hiding among my own kind, but the Rushmore clue.
Right.
Boy, that's a subtle one, dude.
Mm-hmm.
You might need to explain that to everybody about that one.
Give a quick rundown of how.
So basically what he did, when they were playing a game of chess, they basically knew they were going to escape. He knew he was going to escape, Michael. And so they wanted to meet up together sometime later down the road with his brother Mark, who hopefully would escape too. But if he did, he said, Michael already had a plan in his mind of where he was going to hide. So he said to his brother, because he knew they were being watched and listened to all the time, he said, look, I will hide among my own kind. He didn't say what that meant, but he just said that's what it is. We need to rush more, he said, because they will be coming soon. And so that
more will hide me later.
There you go. That's what he said.
I have to rush.
Rushmore will hide me later. So that was his cryptic way of saying every school, the ones among whom I will hide, will be named after one of the presidents. So when you start looking for me, it'll be named after one of the presidents whose faces is on Mount Rushmore. So whenever you start looking, there's no point looking in any other school other than the ones who is named after one of the presidents. And I thought, dang, boy, that's pretty subtle. But anyway, Mark
I thought that was extremely subtle.
Works it out at the end, apparently, because he finds him.
But they're brothers, right? So
they are twins even. So yeah, the telepathic.
It was very subtle, and he had to be subtle so that
that's right.
people who were listening to the people who were imprisoning him wouldn't hear, and then eventually his brother would figure it out.
And he did. So yeah. So yeah, no, I don't think it was super, it was quite interesting, the people he met on the way, the hippies who just accepted him as he was, even though he was appearing to be a 12-year-old child. They didn't even ask him anything about what are you doing, little boy. And it was interesting too how he handled all of the kind of references to him as a child being out alone. And it's a different time as well. It still was a different time in the world when kids did actually seem to get out more without danger. I think in the earlier days, we didn't actually worry so much about kids walking out on their own, did it? And I remember I was a kid in 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years old. I used to go all over the place. Nobody thought anything about it. Now it's like
all day long.
I know. I'd be 5 miles away from home. I wouldn't even think about it. But now it's like, what are you doing out? So it's a different world, and that was actually reflected in the writing. So yeah, it's good.
Here's an interesting point about the escape from the prison. You see, this is sort of a TV trope. You see these guys are always going through the air ducts, right?
I was going to say that they always use the air ducts. The guards should have known that. Did they ever watch TV?
And when you see it on TV, the air ducts are always like so huge. They're like so big you could like put a horse through them, and they're totally clean. There's no dust in them or anything like that. So I tried to go against that trope by saying this air duct was so small that Mark couldn't do it, only Michael could, and he was coughing and everything because of the dust. And when he got to the point at the grate that was open to the wall, he was facing the wrong way and he couldn't turn himself around in it. That's how tight it was. And it wasn't, there was a point when he's running through the air duct where there's nothing below him and he almost falls down into a hole. And so what he's able to do is basically it's a T. He backs himself back to that point where there's a hole. He can twist his body around, turn it, and then go back and face the right way so his feet can kick out the vent.
Yeah, I did appreciate that it was a little bit smaller because I've always wondered about all these buildings that have these gigantic air vents, you know?
Yeah, even Bruce Willis did that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Die Hard, baby.
in chapter 39, Michael finally comes face to face with Senator Perkins. How did you, the readers, feel about this confrontation? Was it satisfying or did you expect something else? Give us a rundown of the confrontation, Bob. What happens?
Michael and his team, his brother and Charlene, set up a meet at the Paramount Theater so that they can videotape the senator's confession. And that had all been pre-foreshadowed that the Paramount had videotapes and stuff because of Charlene having gone to the play before. And so he meets face to face with the senator, and he basically gets the senator to say, yes, I imprisoned a little boy and it was for my own good. And Michael says, you were just trying to protect your own hide. And the guy says, well, you're not as dumb as you look. And so the senator is basically confessing this all, knowing that he's not knowing that he's being videotaped. And then finally Michael he just is in a rage facing this guy, and he finally gets to kick him in the nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And that had all been foreshadowed too, because when he was in college, Michael had a roommate who was a little person and kind of a little bit of a philosopher, and his roommate, I can't remember his roommate's name.
Archie,
yeah, who's a little person, says, we can kick somebody in the nuts and we're so short they can't even stop us, you know? And so that was sort of a foreshadowing. And anyway, but Michael got to express himself, and I was hoping it would be sort of a, what do you call it? Good for the reader, you know, cathartic for that experience.
Well, what I liked about that, I think that's where the girl that he had known years before,
Michelle Hansen. Yep.
Yeah, had grown up and become a cop, and she's the one who was assigned to that SWAT team that was trying to stop him. And so he had done her some sort of kindness at one time, hadn't he?
Well, they were friends, and in the very first chapter, when Michael is being chased by the government agents and he's swinging from the trees trying to get over to the river, and they shoot at him, she's in the lunchroom window with her hands against the glass watching a SWAT team chase her friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then she sees him 10 years later, he's the same age, and he's being chased by a SWAT team again.
And
so she sort of switches roles and helps him to get out.
And I liked that. I liked that sort of bookends of her watching the SWAT team, being on the SWAT team. And the fact that, you know, throughout this book, we're seeing the people who act out of self-interest, and then we're seeing the people like her who take a stand, even if it's going to cost them their job, and say, you know, I'm not doing this. I'm not trapping what seems to be a 12-year-old kid in here with a bunch of guys with guns shooting at him. This is crazy. So I really liked that. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was good.
We see the car chase from Mark's perspective and from the perspective of the pursuer.
Yes.
Who did you think died in that crash?
Remember Agent Khan is chasing
Sure.
Michael?
Yeah, it was a nice little turnaround.
I knew there had to be a twist. I'm like, something's up.
Yeah, he can't die now.
Right.
Come on. It's a great little twist. I mean, I didn't expect who it was, because they'd kind of fallen out of our kind of awareness for such a long time in the book. And then boom, there they are. Sadly,
so let me
boom.
explain this to Sean and Lisa and Rebecca. one of the storylines that happened was that there was a two young people came into the school late, and Charlene introduced them to the students in like the second chapter, and their names were Greg and Karen Urban, and they were bad kids. And Karen was a lot taller than Greg, and they were brother and sister, but they were like in the same age or the same high school, the same.
I thought they were twins too, weren't they?
Oh, they were twins. That's right, they were twins. But Karen
That's why
was
they were in
taller.
the same grade.
And so they were bad kids, and so Charlene had been trying to deal with them, and at one point they disappeared. It was like while Charlene was dealing with this whole thing about Wayne Zimmerman and about government agents coming to get Michael, then this other thing dropped in her lap saying the foster parent called up and said, Greg and Karen are gone, we don't know where they are or anything. And there had been a hint about their mom being in drug rehabilitation in the Twin Cities and stuff. So that was sort of a side storyline. But then what happened later is that Agent Khan is chasing this car, and he sees a taller female and a shorter boy. And it was really the urban kids had conveniently stolen Charlene's car right at the point when Charlene and Michael went back to her house to pick up some stuff. They had been hiding out in her shed, and they took off with their car because they wanted to go visit their mom. And Greg, it wasn't just an accident, because Greg sort of had an issue. He had a bone to pick with Charlene, so he sort of planned to steal her car.
And I think that's part of what makes it believable, rather than just, oh wow, that's a pretty wild coincidence.
Yeah.
You know, you set it up that there is a reason somebody else was in her car.
And I didn't think that readers would completely believe that I just killed off the protagonist and the two most important people in the book. But it would make them wonder, at least, right? If they're not dead, then maybe they didn't really die. So my son had a good reaction to this. He said he didn't think that I killed off, Michael and Charlene, but he said he didn't think that it was the two kids that stole the car either, because he didn't think I would have killed kids in my story.
Yeah, I found it really hard to believe that you had killed either the kids or the main character. So at this point, I don't remember, didn't somebody else somehow get in the middle of the chase or something?
Well, Mark was involved in the chase too.
Oh, okay.
Mark was in his truck, and basically three cars being chased. The urban twins took their car, and then Agent Khan was following them, and then Mark was following them, trying to intercept and stop Agent Khan. So Mark thought that his brother really died in the car crash.
Yeah, which is a powerful scene. There was value in that.
And for those people who don't know about St. Cloud really is called the Granite City, and they do have many quarries all around the city.
Yep.
So it's pretty true, and it's pretty true that a car could have gone over the. Oh, one other trivia point. I like bringing this in. It's another trope that cars explode when they go down a cliff.
Yeah.
And in most cases, cars don't.
No.
But did you notice what car they were using?
Pinto.
Ford Pinto. Remember? Do you guys remember the history when Ford Pinto was good? Remember that, Sean? When they would get hit in the rear and exploding. So I made it a point that the car that Charlene borrowed was a Ford Pinto, and I specifically said the car went over and did a turn and landed on its back end. So that's I could actually put an
too subtle for
car
me.
in there and make it believable.
Wow.
Wasn't that fun?
So I guess Judy used that too when she made sure to explain why Haley's car exploded so much going over the cliff. Because she made sure to mention that the bad guy stuffed the car full of moonshine, flammable.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. So isn't it great that we as authors know all these exciting ways to kill other people?
Exactly.
Surprised people aren't afraid to be around us.
Dangerous internet searches.
Yeah. Well, I think I've posted on Facebook 2 incidents. My pest control guy was here a few weeks ago, and all of a sudden I looked at I've got this gigantic whiteboard that completely covers the wall in my dining room, which is my office. And there are questions on there about killing people and yeah, I looked at that and went, maybe I should erase that. And then one day I was taking my car in for an oil change, and I was still trying to decide if Simon was going to kill James or, try or fail or what. And so I had this note in my car saying, should I kill James? And I looked down and I went, I think maybe I should move that note before. I'm sure people have stories like that. Yeah. How can I chop her head off? So, any last comments on the book?
You've got it. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, did you say, Bob, you didn't have a Beach Boys reference, or you did? I found it in 249.
Yeah, there you go.
Really?
Yeah.
Surfing USA.
Surfing USA.
Was that a song that was playing or what?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, put a song on, didn't he?
I think it was
There you go.
249. Let's see. Yeah, you had a bunch of them in there. I was listening to the radio. Beach Boys sang Surfing USA. The Chiffon sang He's So Fine. Bobby Vinton.
Oh, that's right, with the hippies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I rest my case.
Yep.
I found it.
I shouldn't have argued, right, Chris? Because it was more recent for you than for me, right?
Yeah, that's true. You probably haven't read it for ages.
Right.
I was looking for it. I couldn't find it. Thanks, man. Thanks, Joe.
Yeah, right. The only thing I was going to say was I didn't know my brother could write so good, because as I was reading this, I was just amazed that.
Yeah, it's a good book.
And I knew like all the references, the puzzle, like the mystery and the puzzles, because Bob's into like figuring stuff out like that. So I knew there were lots of things like that in there, which made it pretty fun to read.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did put in a lot of references that people who knew me would get it more, like just the fact that there were twins for one, and that the twins' middle names were the same as my brother and mine first names. Plus, here's another thing, is that my mom's name is Jan, and Matthew's name was Matthew Janson.
Mm.
There you go.
Tribute
The
to
rights of
Mom.
which we know.
Yeah. So I put in there was a bunch of sort of inside information and Easter eggs in the book.
Sweet.
Those are fun.
One of my books where Sean is when he's just left the prison, and he's very upset after seeing the kid who killed his father. And so as he's driving home, I don't know if any of you picked up on this. Actually, none of you would, because none of you knew me when I had the big 15-passenger van. But as Sean is driving home, he sees someone who looks just like me in a big red 15-passenger.
That's funny.
I don't know if anyone's ever picked up on that, but
Gave yourself a
any of you other
cameo.
authors ever put yourself in the book secretly?
Oh, yeah.
Sean, who said that? Sean?
I did. Well, when I do my book in June, you'll see I actually am the main character in a certain way. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah, so it was an easy one for me to write, but I haven't had the chance yet to read your book that we're discussing tonight, but I'm definitely intrigued. I'm going to be getting it.
I'll get it, Sean.
Nice.
I loved reading a lot of horror and suspense, and just your description of when they're in the vent, that feeling of claustrophobia that I think I'm going to get when I read it makes it worth it right there. So I'm going to be reading it for sure. It sounds very intriguing. So
Nice. Thanks for saying so, Sean.
it is really well-written book. Especially impressive. It's, I think, the first time you ever did any fiction writing at all, isn't it, Bob?
Yeah, it is.
Just started 4 or 5 years ago.
And I have to thank my writing group in Rochester, because the first half of the book, at least, was actually peer reviewed by the writers and stuff. And the main guy who led the writing group was named Mike Calmbeck, and he had a book published already, and he was a very good writer. So he really helped me a lot in writing the book. Plus, the other thing for you writers, I'll tell you that I listened to Katie Weiland. She's got a podcast called Helping Writers Become Authors. And I learned a lot about writing from listening to her podcast too.
What's that podcast again?
It's called helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com.
Okay, cool.
So that was really helpful. So between the podcasts and, that I listen to all the time in the writing group, that really helped me a lot because I didn't know anything about writing. So Joe, if I hadn't had those people helping me, it would have been one of these lame indie books that you find so often on Amazon.
Yeah, I told you I've reviewed a few of them, and it's like, wow, that sounded like such a good book, and it could have been, but it was so badly written. That's frustrating. So, at one point, I mean, my first real exposure to any other writers, my own writing, and then people in Night Writers, and they all write very well. So I was really shocked when I started reading some of these other indie books, and some of them are very good.
I'm very happy that we've got good writers in Night Writers because
we're very fortunate
to give some honest critique. I remember that there was when I was in Rochester, there was one writer that was really bad, and he was so juvenile, and and we had to read everybody's stuff, and I could not stand it, just reading his stuff because it was so juvenile, and it was really hard. And I know everybody's got to start somewhere, right? But then having to review it and spend time in it is really hard week after week.
Did he take your advice?
Did
he take your advice?
Well, I don't remember. I wrote out my notes on what I thought. If he did or not, I don't know. I think some people are just at a certain level, and they're going to be stuck there for a while.
Yeah, and some people are pretty convinced that they're very great at writing and will just dismiss. And I'm not. I know there was one person that there was the comment made, you can't give like 2 full sentences in a foreign language. Nobody's going to know what the character is saying. And she was so fluent in the language, she was just convinced that it was absolutely obvious. And she's a very good writer in general, but on that one point, and people kept saying it and saying it and saying it. Always just, it's obvious what it means. And the whole group saying, no, it's not.
I remember reading a book called How to Write Badly, and it was like 100 things not to do or something like that. It was really useful. The common stuff that you see all the time.
No, and I don't want to, she's a very good writer, but that one little sticky thing, and I can see that there would be a lot of people who are not good writers who, no matter what you say, they're just going to be like, oh no, it's great.
Hey, I got to run. Good meeting y'all.
Yeah,
thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe. Nice meeting you.
Good one, Joe.